And before I start, I'd like to ask real quick, how many volunteer departments are represented right now? One. Sir, can you tell me where you're from?
Campbell County,
Okay.
Rural Fire Service Depending.
Excellent. Excellent. Ms. Laura, did you get any responses?
Audio, it's picking up. That's what
They're coming, if there's any volunteers on there.
nobody is ready.
Okay. All right. Well, the purpose of the subcommittee that we've started here is to get feedback from the departments that this really affects you as our stakeholders. And what we want to do is, at the end of the day, make it attainable for all firefighters in the state of Tennessee to be able to achieve receiving the EIP stipend that comes out from doing the minimum training through the EIP program. And so what we want to do is see how we can not only streamline the process on the volunteer side, but also the career side as a whole for the program itself. And so we're taking some, this is our third meeting so far with this committee. And we've had one in East or West Tennessee, one in Middle Tennessee, and now we're in East Tennessee. And we'd like to be able to find a workaround or to which will serve best not only for the commission office to be able to process the EIPs, but also for the volunteers and how we can make it easier for them to be able to obtain the certification or the education incentive through the certification process. So some of the things that we talked about was in the previous meetings was eliminating the pre-approved course for volunteers. If you remember, for those that have started with the EIP program from the inception for the volunteers, that first year, we actually took any documented training that was conducted during the course of that year and accepted that as the 30 hours or towards the 30 hours of training for that year, as long as it had a documented roster with what the course title was. In that first year, we actually had a lot of participation. But then in year two, it went to follow the career path, which was October 1st deadline that a course or a curriculum had to be submitted to the commission for the following year. And for us as the commissioners and for the commission office, we understand and recognize that not every volunteer department has a true dedicated training officer. It's not going to happen because of time constraints and what have you. And so what we want to do is, how can we go back to looking, what would it look like if we went back to that type of setup? But if we look at it on that side, we also want to look at it on the career side too, because we want to have this as uniform as possible. So one of the things that I want to start with is, you represent which county again? I'm sorry.
Campbell
County. Have you participated in the EIP program one time? Was that the first year?
Yes. I had it ready for the second time, taught most of the classes, run into some scheduling ordeal, never could get the fire chief, only like 6 hours the last time, having all my people in, but the fire chief never could come up with a date, so that took 24 hours training to get no pay. But I said, you need to talk to the chief when they were ill about that. And then the next year, I got a whole bunch of crap going on. I mean, I'm the grant writer, I'm president of 2 boards, got a full-time job at Y12 Fire Department, run a mowing business, so.
And you're the training coordinator.
Well, tried to get it together, had most of it put together, trying to get the chief, trying to get everybody together to do it. My fire chief is also, works at ORNL Fire Department, so he's their training guy. So he's kind of busy down there. So we just couldn't get everything together to meet the deadline. So now you got to wait a whole nother year because you missed that deadline, to get it submitted in, because there's just so much going on all the time. I've talked to a whole bunch of fire departments all across before I come here. So I got a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, I'm unique. I get to work at Y-12 Fire Department, which employs a whole bunch of people from the whole region. And I have talked to volunteer departments up around Nullichucky. I've talked to the departments in my county, the career ones that's participating, and the volunteers. I've talked to Loudoun County. I work with those guys that's there, Knox County, KFD.
Okay. So what has been the consensus with these conversations?
Simplify.
And that's this committee.
So like I talked to Loudoun County yesterday, big deadline to get it all submitted in. We're 4 months into it and they haven't even started the process of reviewing their records. I think he said that they were just now getting to it 4 months in. So, I mean, I realize there's short staff, the people who do that. So like for that instance, is there not a way like when people, they do a class, they submit it, where those people won't have to review everything at once? Submit it and then they review it and approve it at that particular, that's one way of streamlining those people down there that had to review that, because that's a lot to dump on somebody at one time. You know, if you've got a lot of people participating. Nullichucky, I talked to fire chief up there, who's also the NAVCO salesman. And he says they only had one department in that whole area up there that they knew of that's participating in it, because they just didn't want to fool with all of it. All the trying to get it scheduled and trying to, because like him, he realizes just like I do that we're taking taxpayer dollars and there's a responsibility for that. And there's an accountability process for that. You know, so he don't want to get involved in something that he can't be 100% responsible for, you know, for audits. And because, I mean, you're taking taxpayer dollars, you got to be able to say you're doing, you know, you're putting on paper. So people do realize that that is an issue out here, that we are taking that and they've got to be accountable for that. I got to talk to the Carroll fire chief and the city of Carroll, and he said if he didn't have one guy doing it, he wouldn't go with it. Jacksboro fire chief says it's just a constant headache with if he misses a class, got to send the substitution form in. And, you know, it's just things like that. I talked to, I believe, was Morrell the East Tennessee guy before?
Phyllis.
Yeah, okay. No, the one that went to sale for Pierce. Miranda, yeah. So I talked to him and once, and I said, if it's a problem, I said, I know that we've got firemen out here that would sit down and make 5 classes. If you just contacted 20 different fire departments, say, hey, could you sit down and do 5 classes? So let's put it online. And fire department got the criteria. Here's what we got to do. Let's just go online, pick one, pull it off. It's already pre-approved. We don't have to do nothing. You know, that was one scenario. I've heard complaints that accept no medical training as part of the fire training, except for CPR. I've heard some of the fire chiefs say that. I mean, I haven't dug into it.
So I'm gonna ask a quick question.
Yeah.
Do you know where the Tennessee Fire Commission website is?
Yes.
Okay, at the very bottom, under rules and policies, all of the rules for the fire commission are on here.
Yes, I've read them.
In chapter 7.
Yeah.
You can actually claim up to 16 hours of medical training.
Well, one of them told me he couldn't. One of the Loudoun County guys told me he couldn't because he had a couple of things that I was questioning that I was going to clarify today. Like one was he said that y'all required an electronic signature now. And I said, well, I just got through talking and all you had to do was scan everything. That's what the rules say. You write it, send it as a whole package. You know, you put it in a folder and you send it to them like we done the first year. But he said that he had to go out and buy a pen and an iPad. And I said, buddy, I don't know. So I said, I'll clarify. So I believe you're not reading the same stuff that I'm reading. But
So
I'm a little unique. I've been a volunteer for 45 years. I worked at the city in Knoxville, work at Y-12. So I've got to where I can look at it from all the sides. career, industrial, volunteer, and get to see all the sides of it and know how the whole thing works. And some of it is difficult. Like if you miss a class, and I understand the purpose of the class. The purpose of class, so if I put in that I'm gonna be teaching on this day, and y'all wanna say, well, let's just go see, because that's what the purpose of it is, kind of like for an audit, to make sure they're doing it. And then if you don't do it, you're supposed to send a substitution in. That was the way it was kind of presented to me, is the reason we gotta have the schedule and the class times, just to make sure that if the fire commission wanted to come in and sit in, they know the certain date that they can come and make sure that you're doing what you're supposed to. You say you're doing.
That's correct.
That's the way that was presented to me. And it's like, well, if you say you're doing this class and you don't do it, and you just send in a roster, there's other ways of finding out whether those people taught that class or not.
Have you heard of Fire Commission 101?
Oh, I got some going on. Is that the class that we went to teach, to do the program?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so I went to that one.
Have any of these other departments that you know of been able to attend any of those,
I know the guy that's doing Carroll Fire Departments, he was there with me on that one. But no, none of these other people are coming to those classes.
So,
And I've read the rules, and I said, well, the rules are real simple. I don't think that people are.
so let me ask you this. As a volunteer, representing a volunteer department, have you had any pushback as far as the firefighter 1 or firefighter 2 components that go with?
Are you talking about the 64-hour? I mean, are you talking about getting certifications?
Yes.
I've not heard anybody say that. We try to get our people. I try to get my people down to the fire academy and do their live burns and get their test and all that.
So just to clarify, once for the third year of participation
Yeah.
in the EIP, VEIP program, this firefighter has to have completed the 16, the 64, and their live burn.
Right.
By the fifth year of participation, currently as it stands,
Yeah.
the firefighter should have attained their hazmat awareness, hazmat operations, and firefighter 1.
Right.
And so those are some of the things that we're hearing about from our volunteer community. So that's
Yeah.
what he's.
So you're I'm gonna tell you, there's a department who's not gonna be able to make those certifications. Stony Fork. It's in Campbell County. It's across the mountain. They got 6 firemen. They cover 150 structures, maybe 200 houses. 200 people at the most over there. And they're not going to put forth the effort to send somebody to the fire academy to do live fire. To get their fire 1 certification from the fire commission. Their people's just not interested in it. I got people in Jellicoe Rescue, that they've got people who are not going to do that. White Oak are not going to do that, just because they're putting forth a lot of effort for something they're really not going to use, because they got other jobs, unless they're pursuing a career in the fire service.
So, interesting point you bring up, and this is what the question is. Any of your departments in your county participate or actively do the job of either hazmat awareness or hazmat operation?
The CELAfologist is just now going through that, but yeah, they're a career department, and they're wanting to try to get their people to a technician level.
Does your department participate in hazardous material calls?
Well, 2 of my members is the EMA people, and I'm a hazmat specialist, and we got others that work for other career departments, like Oak Ridge, City of Oak Ridge, Rural Metro, and all that, and all those have those hazmat certifications. Do we show up on a hazmat run? We're gonna be there for some part of it, but as far as making entries, no, because we're not gonna let them, because we're not got that certification.
My question is more geared to how many departments in your area actually,
Hazmat response, 0.
okay,
None of them have the level A suits, none of them have level B suits. If they don't pull it off the EMA truck, it's not, they're gonna call somebody else.
in one of the ideas we threw out is creating a separate certification for the volunteer side that follows state law, which state law requires everyone to have their basic training of the 6416 live fire. And as we know, 16 leads into 64 because it covers a lot of the same stuff. But if we introduce the hazmat awareness component into that, because that's an important piece, they should be able to know how to utilize the ERG, right? Okay. If we looked at a certification like that, that was Tennessee issued and not accredited through an outside agency, would that be something that could be easily attainable to the volunteers in your area?
Are you talking about the TEMA hazmat classes?
Just-
But because they've kind of gotten so far into it, you know, that a lot, some of the volunteers I've heard of that, they don't, the TEMA has made those classes so long. Some of them that they're saying, well, we just don't have time to gather those, to get those National Fire Academy TEMA classes. Because I think some of them's gone to like 80 hours or something. I'm not tracking that, so I'm not really.
TEMA awareness is available for 4 hours.
Yeah.
And then the practicals are pretty much using the ERG itself, 50 question written test prep.
Yeah, and you could actually get up the line through TN Fire Online.
Yeah, I'm not tracking it. I'm a hazmat specialist, but I don't track. I go a different route. When I started in the program years ago, I mean, they come out and they teach a class 3 or 4 nights or whatever, and then we'd be done with it and over with it. And I believe it was called something else then. Basic incident concepts, and implementation, yes, and all that, but they've kind of gone, stretched those classes out, or they're longer now. And because they used to, you could go 2 or 3 nights, maybe a couple of weeks, and you'd have that done. Now, kind of like they want to get them all in one big long stretch, and people just can't take off work and do those kind of things, you know, because you got people who work factory work and.
Commissioner Scott.
It's well, they put it in 64.
Commissioner Green, I think that's something that.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay, or am I muffled?
Are you trying to do a Verizon commercial?
Yeah, trying to do a Verizon commercial. So, speaking of what the gentleman there in the room, and I think I heard David Doors in the background as well, and I think he can vouch for the same thing I'm fixing to say. So, going around and talking to departments in West Tennessee, the 2 biggest issues in West Tennessee, and I get calls on it all the time, is one, all the required paperwork, having to put a program together, having to do a program by a certain date, and then getting that paperwork turned in. The ones I've talked to, all the different departments, my county included, when they did it the first year, they could use their training that they've got scheduled. They could do that, turn it in as long as they have a signed roster that works for them, because something may come up and they may have to cancel a meeting and move it to the following Monday night, but they're still doing the training. It's just not on a set schedule, set amount of dates. That's probably one of the biggest complaints I hear from departments in West Tennessee. And then getting past operation level as a commissioned certificate. All the departments I know in my county and the county to the west and east of us all put firefighters through 64 and 16, and then they go on to their live burn. And I think all those guys could pass their awareness level, but when you get into ops level or higher, that's where people they're just quitting because number one, they're not going to do any hazmat skills. Number two, most of them are not going to have the ability to pass that test. I mean, I've seen career firefighters, and I'm sure y'all agree with me as well. I've seen career firefighters take 10 or 15 times before they pass a test for ops. But that's the two biggest things in the west end of the state that I'm hearing is, one, the paperwork and having dates that they've got to have a program turned in by and have certain dates to do training. And then two is getting past that operations level. That's where you see a lot of departments drop off and just don't do the program anymore. Once we're now at that threshold where you've got to have that, that's what's killing our program. That and some of the other issues we've already spoke of.
So,
Yeah. We talked at the last meeting in West Tennessee. Have people who are just engineers that are never going to. And we talked about them being excluded because they could not do the 61.
Let's follow up with his conversation. So I know I'm wearing the Jackson Fire Department shirt when I'm in here, and I'm a full-time career firefighter, and that's all we have. But 99% of the time when I'm in these meetings, I'm speaking on behalf of the Firemen Association. And most smaller combination departments, the volunteer departments are the ones that reach out to me statewide. And it's the same conversations. And I think in the last meetings, we discussed as commissioners, and I'm not saying anything negative, the feeling in the past has been our information is out there. You can go to the website and get it. We're doing the one-on-ones. And as you're hearing right here, these departments, especially these smaller departments that don't have training officers, the chief's trying to take care of everything, or hey, you're my firefighter, you're the main training guy, that doesn't know where to go look, what questions to ask. And they depend on what they hear, and they're not getting the information from the right people all the time. So the one-on-one classes are great. The other problem we addressed in the past is if they went to a one-on-one class when that law passed, so much has changed and they think they know what they need to know based on what they were told. So it's not that we're not getting the information to them. It's the ones who don't know where to go ask. And I pick on Josh, he's doing this position in here, and field coordinators, I think. And if they don't know which one of these little departments to go hit, and we all get busy, they get left behind. And it's nobody's fault. It's just a lot of information that was thrown in automatically by July 1 year, and it is what it is. So trying to reach out and figure out how to get to everybody. And honestly, a lot of it today is social media, putting the information out on social media to hit people. Hey, if you don't know, reach out to people. They can call me anytime. And if I don't know, I get in touch with Josh or whatever part of the state they're in, doing that. The documentation part, Tina is doing an outstanding job. I know I owe her a bottle of migraine medicine probably, but we have one person trying to keep up with it. I myself for Jackson have submitted at least 4 extra classes since January. And with the storms of the past month, 3 more letters that I know she hasn't probably had a chance to take a look at yet. And the changes we're submitting are already taught, done and gone. I don't even know if they've been looked at yet because the staffing and the personnel issues, whatever they may be. And I don't know, Heather, you've done a great job on that. Tina's doing an outstanding job. So it's nothing against them. It's a lot of paperwork. So when we have storm hit and at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm telling the chief I'm moving classes for tomorrow that the back is teaching. And it's outside that 30-day window, that's documentation that's got to be sent. And even for me as a full-time training officer, if I forget to send that documentation and you show up to audit me, that's not an approved class. So that is a huge deterrent on these smaller departments trying to keep up with all this documentation that has to be done throughout the entire year. It's not just submitted in October, turn it all in January. It's everything that goes on throughout the year. My filing cabinet is, well, the whole filing cabinet already just for this year. Just trying to get started.
And then what happens if buy a new piece of equipment or something and volunteers are limited on time and you get that in and hey, we need to spend 10 or 15 hours training on this piece of equipment or this new task that for some reason or another, we've got to start doing. And that's, why can't we train on that and send that, instead of now we got to do this other plus this right here. And it's so hard to get the volunteers to put their time in. 'Cause it's not like, when I started, it was easy. You didn't have to work 2 jobs to keep your family going and all that. Today, these guys have got to work 2 and 3 jobs, just to keep their bill paid. And it's a struggle, plus making runs. I got 5 stations carrying cover 450 per mile. And it's a struggle. Because we're running so much.
Going back, if you don't mind, all right. The conversation. The conversation we had in previous meetings about the 1664 live fire. As we've talked in the past, I know we're getting ready to go through all this. I've done more research into the minimum training law. So we tend to quit reading when we get down to the part we think is important. There are 2 exemptions in the minimum training law that fix a lot of these problems for this. If the chief has someone who is medically unable to complete live fire training, they're exempt from it. But that doesn't mean he can't use them on the scene. And the other exemption that has never been brought up in here that fixes one problem is if the chief deems this firefighter as not an ideal H firefighter, he's exempt from live fire. That hits all of our support personnel. That because we're giving money out is a term I keep hearing, which I don't agree with. It's a program that's been established by the governor. The higher stipulation is put on the state supplemental pay program than what's put on being firefighters, which I think we've already all addressed, but I don't know if everybody knew that clause is actually in there.
So as an example, my daughter, she's a little skinny thing. She's 26 years old. She's belongs to the fire department, been there. I mean, I took her on runs with me. She growed up. She's been there. She participated the first year in the training program. She's took the 64-hour class. She's not going to go take the live burn. She can't wear the turnout gear and an air pack. It all weighs more than she does. And she realized that she's not going to ever be able to put on the air pack or in a structure. But she does all the other stuff around the outside. Drives truck, pumps water, does all that. But she knows she's never going to be into the fire. She physically can't do it because, me and her had that conversation like, remember, when you're at that job, that guy next to you could go down. Can you pull him out? Can you go in that structure and pull that person out? Because she thought about a career as a fireman. And can you physically do that? There's a personal thing, people have to do. Not saying just for a girl, but, there's males that are not physically big enough to actually ever commit to completing that live fire because they're just not big enough. They can't support the turnout gear, the heavy air pack, and people have to realize there's some people who just can't do that. But there's other tasks. They can pull holes on the outside. They can go on brush fires. They can put in lines. They can run medical calls and all that, but they're left out of that portion of it. Because they can't complete the live burn. Because me and her had talked about, well, when you get that 5-year point, so you're going to be left out. So there's
on PCA, what David just brought up.
Paragraph A outlines the classes. Paragraph B, the following firefighters are exempt from training requirements of subsection A. 1, any firefighter who was in the fire service on July 1, 2009, who entered the fire service before June 30th, 2004, and any firefighter who is certified by medical doctors, medically, physically unable to complete the training requirements. However, the fire department may not allow these firefighters to engage in active firefighting operations, which is our support firefighters. And then C, any firefighter who is certified by the fire department's chief officer that they will not operate within an IDLH environment determined to be immediately dangerous to life and health is exempt from the live firefighting portion of this training, referenced in A2.
So my question now, hearing that piece. How does that lead over to our EIP today? Meaning, how many people do we have in the pipeline right now that are not getting it because they haven't met minimum requirements that we set forward? But because we're not following PCA fully, they're being excluded.
I wouldn't say we're not following it. Our rules have said for EIP, you must meet the minimum requirements regardless of exemptions in statute. Our rules are saying that we're not accepting those exemptions for EIP purposes.
Correct.
And they're very specific that you must complete 1664.
But the statute does exempt those individuals from the statutory requirement.
So trying to be the difficult advocate here for this. So take this in consideration. So got a fireman at the city of La Follette years ago. I'm not gonna do this and this and this and this. So he's getting the fire commission to come in and read him the test. So he's done us about the rock, but he's passing the fire test and all the other firemen are complaining. So they're coming to me and they're complaining. So I come to the fire commission and I said, hey, y'all are reading these questions to these people. What's the requirements? Because these other firemen are complaining about it. And I believe today y'all got a rule that they have to have a certified doctor's thing. That's caused me. Because I brought that up way back then. Because at that point in time, they didn't have that. And they said, well, you're right. And these firemen were complaining. So that got you. So I know how people will take advantage of the exemptions. So if you allow that, there has to be a check and balance. Just can't have the fire chief say, yep, they're good to go. I say they're not able to do it. You know, we got to have a good reason why they're not. I'm not advocating for all for one side. We got to make this legit program.
So one of the issues that Commissioner Boatright and I are discussing right now, when the program was rolled out back in 21, we basically had just a handful of months to put something on paper for what was it going to look like moving forward. And basically we took what was on the career side, which the career side does not have those because obviously what it is.
Keep in mind, years ago, when the rules changed to firefighter 2, there are still exemptions from people who are hired in before that.
Right.
That's no different than what we're doing today.
What would the perfect EIP program look like for your department from start to finish?
For us, a program that I agree you got to have training. We teach the 6400 class in-house. I mean, we do it. I've got qualified people. We can teach it in-house. We do it for all of our new people. Whether they go to live burn or not, that's a different story. If we can ever get them to go down there. But as far as the 64-hour class, you got to have a baseline to do that with. You just can't turn people loose on the truck because like I've always made a statement, well, if that's the case, let's just put gear on the truck and when we show up, we just pass it out. Can you help us? You know what I mean? You got to have a baseline to start with. As far as submitting the training, a minimum that you all require. I mean, you all require the CPR every other year. I
As
believe.
of July 1st, it will no longer be required.
Okay, so you the domestic violence training, I believe is on there.
CISM, SIDS,
SIDS, yeah. is on there. Cause I even went and got the bids instructors to make sure I can teach it if it got a problem. You know, a civil, here's the minimum that you have to have ever, whatever the time periods are. And then as long as everybody's submitting a legit class, and if they, as they taught that class, they submitted, here's our outline, what we taught, here's our training roster. And as you teach them throughout the year, towards it's not such a burden on the fire commission at one big dump. And then if it's not approved, you can reject it and they got the rest of the year. Well, we got to fix that the rest of the year. And if they wait to the end of the year and do that stuff, then that's fooey on them.
So would it be easy for you, for your department, if the October 1st deadline was waived?
That would probably help. Yeah, for that, yes. If we could just do legit training, and how do you come up with what's legit? You don't want a group of guys coming in every Monday night and sitting in a room and shooting a bunch of bull for 2 hours and sign this roster and all that. No, that's not good for nobody on that part. We want legit training. We want the program to be, I want the program to be legit and it be, what we say we're doing. And we don't want untrained people out here responding to alarms anywhere in the state. When that person dials 911, that truck, big red truck shows up, they expect people to know what to do when they get off that truck.
Agreed.
I mean, and that's, that's the way it ought to be. But trying to get all this together to fix that towards legit. Is a task.
If while you're speaking, I'm looking down, I'm writing notes. So it's just repeating a lot of the stuff that we've heard in previous, but I'm re-emphasizing and you brought up a couple of points where along David, one of the notes I just wrote was we need to look at an exemption workaround rule. So, because like Commissioner Boatwright said earlier, you have volunteer departments where that person's just coming in the drive. They're going to be that engineer, be that driver. They're not going into IDLH. They're not going to do anything for that. But and they're still participating in all the training that is taking place. So how do we go ahead and bring them into the fold to allow them to receive that education? So,
well, I'm still going to say that engineer still needs to do the 64-hour class.
And that's in there.
I'm going to say that because he's still going to have a knowledge of what all's going on out there, even though if he's driving, he's going to have to put up ladders. He's going to have to do, he's going to have to know that there's all those tasks in that 64-hour class that doesn't require any live burn except for the fire extinguisher part. If you truly do the fire extinguisher part like you're supposed to. But you know what I'm saying? They still need to be able to do that. They still need to have that training. So that they didn't know how to roll hose, what different types of hose, all the tools, how to start things, how to run things. All that's part of a 64-hour class. I'm not going to say that we never need to take away that 64-hour portion. I mean, I was doing that myself years ago, but when we brought somebody in, before we ever turned them loose, before this program ever started. You can't get on the truck till we come for at least 2 days on a weekend. I was doing a 16-hour class. I mean, I was laying out fire engineering magazines on the table. Look at all these covers. Look at what all we do here, and doing some type of introduction training before it was required.
in TCA, does the state live burn? I can't remember.
Yes.
That's license.
With the exemptions.
I don't have to be firemen, fire chiefs are, and stuff. They'll take advantage of everything can. Everybody here is for it. You know, and won't have nobody going to live burn. That's just the way it is. I mean, you know, because there's people who will manipulate everything they can any way they can. Well, I mean, you know, we want a legit program that works, because from what I understand, there's not that many people taking advantage of the money, is there?
The numbers are dwindling.
Yeah.
And so that's why we created this committee to,
Right.
we know there's some challenges. And like I stated just a few minutes ago, when we created the rule for the volunteer education incentive, we basically regurgitated the career side and watered it down a little bit, to make it
Took off
look
10
like
hours.
it was going to be something that was going to be attainable. Because at the end of the day, the purpose of the fire commission is to enhance the firefighters enhance the certification of firefighters for the state of Tennessee. Make everybody better, you know, make tomorrow better than today. And that's what the purpose of the fire commission is to elevate our firefighters. This just happens to be a program that's off to the side of what we do, and it's just, we're giving a stipend for, we're giving an incentive for document training. So now we're paying for the sins of our fathers, because we see these numbers going down, and both of us, we were part of that, creating that rule in 21 that is now coming in and biting us, if you will. So we want to make tomorrow better than today, and that's why we want to get this feedback to be able to make the changes necessary for a rule change, make it attainable for everybody.
Well, that's why I'm here. I mean, I come up here, I'm trying to figure out a way to make it better, because I keep hearing this stuff from everybody. You know, it's just too much trouble, don't want, and all that, but there's gotta be a fit to it, you know.
And that's what we're working towards.
My state representative is a big pusher, and, you know, he's right with the governor, and he's helped us get so much money into the fire grants, you know, increasing the fire grants. And Dennis Powers is my state representative, and he's a big push, and, you know, so he's a big push for the help to get the funding going and all that. And so, but we want to make sure that we've got a legit program, something that's just.
Open it though. I mean, I agree with what he's saying. It's paperwork on you know, a training officer can almost be a full-time job at times, especially, you know, trying to submit all the paperwork on a volunteer side of substitution, you know, they change. I agree. I would need to work towards something to simplify that. So there's a lot.
Yes, and of course, you know, and I tell them, you know, if you get a fire commission test certification, that counts as your money.
Automatically qualified.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
yeah, like the year before last, I mean, I told you I had those people just like 6 hours. I got the last portion, went to a college class, got the last portion of my special program. I didn't submit it. I could submit it, got the money, but is it fair to those other guys that for the training? Well, I got mine. I'll just send mine in, but you didn't get to do it. That's not the way. So there are classes, you know, and I understand that. I mean, I used to try to send my people when I could to the National Fire Academy the weekends, because I wanted them to learn, you know, make better decisions when they're out there on the ground. Because I'm not going to be there. My fire chief is not going to always be there, being a volunteer department. So they got to be able to make, everyone who shows up's got to be able to make a decision, make a better outcome of whatever's going on the scene.
So switching gears, what would it look like if we eliminated the October 1st deadline across the board for all career and volunteer? do you think, Dave?
The number one thing I've seen as errors during peer review, y'all can speak better on this than I can, is they may put it as a 4-hour class by accident when it's a 2-hour class at times. Other than that, it's incorrect type test questions normally. And that's one I'm gonna ask about anyway. Every commission test I take has all the above, none of the above, except list, truly false. But if I accidentally put one in one of these, the whole thing is thrown out. And there's not a test bank I can get with any book I have. Let me rephrase that. Out of the bought and paid for test banks, I'll have to build one with 20 questions so I can delete the ones that don't count.
Going through red line right now.
Yeah.
I'll just be honest, some of these fire departments out here, they're not gonna be able to
So
establish that, make their own test banks.
So you will know, one thing I am gonna do through the Firemen Association this year that we talked about when it started, everything kind of blew up on us and didn't. I've had enough people reach out to me. The Firemen Association is going to submit online probably about 60 hours of training, fully canned programs that they can get to us and download and use the ones they want. So if we're gonna submit by October this year, that entire program will be submitted through us. But if his department wants to use it, he'll still need to get it and submit it as his program. But at least he'll go in there. I got an agreement with Jones Department to use their PowerPoints. And I can build a 4-hour ladder class, PowerPoints, test questions, generic roster, the whole 9 yards that someone can take and download and use. Because the other feedback I get is a lot of these smaller departments, even if have somebody today, tomorrow that one's gone, you got a new person that has no idea how to do this. Where to start at. I think the last year Mike Moran was here when I was starting, we had all that together for a 30-hour program. Director at the time kind of shot that one. So I just never redid it and started, so we're gonna work on the program again.
Is that the one where we were talking about putting it on the web and I just go pull it off?
That way you
Yeah.
don't have to use all the classes I have, but if you want to use some,
Yeah, that's what I said. We got educated firemen all across the state that would be willing to make these and put them online. You just go, as long as you're meeting what the requirements for that 30 hours is, if you gotta have this much of hazmat or this much rescue, or, as long as you pull and you're submitting,
And of course, TN fire training is still after investing in a lot of training that's free.
with the limited how many computer hours you can have. Yeah. Because people still need to use their hands and do stuff.
So going through red line. There's nothing in rule that states that you can't have all of the above or none of the above on your answers.
I thought it was just true and false that you couldn't have.
And it may have gotten changed because I can't keep up with them either.
Want to double check that?
Does every class have to have a test?
Yeah.
Yes.
10-question no.
So it's one question per hour or a minimum of 10?
Yeah.
Right.
So the reason I asked that, so if are there certain classes that you can teach, you can just submit a practical? Here's what they done. Like when you go do the fire commission test
So let me ask you this,
and you got a thing like running a pump.
is the practical still a test?
Yeah, general that way. I've asked that before.
Yeah, but you see where I'm getting at, or certain skills, certain things that people do are more on the practical side. So if you had a practical check sheet, would that suffice for a test per se? Like running a pump.
I've
Gotta
asked
take
that
this, you
before.
gotta do that.
If I bring my guys in and do nothing but search and rescue training, 4 hours. I can't take a practical sheet like the commission's practicals and say, hey, you passed this because you say I have to have a written test. So we still have to go back in the classroom and take a written test, which isn't a big deal for me, but some of these volunteer departments, that's time.
Plus you're eating up 30 minutes to an hour of class, hands-on practical time, doing a written test for practical work. I've had that to bring up from a couple of different chiefs. Brought that up. I mean, you've actually got some things that your test would be practical. Just like when we go take firefighter 1, firefighter 2 commission test, there's a practical check off, hook up foam inductor or put together Hurst tools, or, you've got a practical test sheet, you got to go down through that you have to check off, but they have to, because that's why they go test at some fire department somewhere. It's been a long time. I believe you still do that, don't you?
Laura, is there any comments from online? Okay, thank you. I gotta get used to asking that question now that we're doing teams for our meetings. Commissioner Green, do you have anything that you want to add?
No, I think some of the things that's been spoke on are stuff that we actually need to work on trying to move forward. Doing away with the deadline, I think, will help some of your volunteers on trying to get classes. I still say the biggest problem for the volunteers is having to put together the classes, a test, and all that information, and trying to get it submitted and done on certain dates. I still think that's one of their biggest Achilles heels. But that's something that we're just going to have to look at. And then I still think whether we do a Tennessee, basic firefighter certification issued by us, or like we had spoke about in the meeting in West Tennessee, I still think that would increase our numbers if we do away with some of the other requirements, because, take West Tennessee, I'd say probably 50% of your volunteers are farmers, and they're in the fields and they're planting and they're row cropping. And they're not going to take the time to go take a hazmat test when they're never going to run a hazmat call, or they're not going to go try to pass that exam. That's going to be their Achilles heel. If you want to kill the program completely, we keep the requirements we got now, and it's going to kill it completely. And that's not the intent of this whole program. And I know we're dealt with trying to figure out the solution for the problem, but if we don't figure out a simpler way to get their certification and try to move forward, it's just going to go away. That's just my personal opinion.
Thank you. Dr. Zimmerman, is there anything you'd like to add?
I think everything that's been talked about today is stuff that we've already discussed at many of our other meetings. We keep hearing us along the same things. I think we kind of got an idea of where we need to steer this ship. Not only to better it for the fire department, for the firefighters and fire departments, but also for the commission office as well, because unfortunately we do not have a database that this information stuff lives in. So every person that's ever submitted, Tina has to go pull that every single time. That's very time consuming. There's a lot of work that goes into that. So to be able to simplify it, make it easier for the office and for the fire department, something to be, which is where we're headed. I think that's where we need to go. So.
Coordinator Hadley, what do you hear in Milton in your department?
A lot of the departments in my own county, we have 6 districts that don't even participate in it. And most of that's due to because most of those volunteers are career firemen, so the career department's taking care of that. But it's the same thing. It's just the headache of the hassle of trying to do something with the paperwork, and they don't have staff to do that like a career department does. That's probably the biggest thing I've heard.
Coordinator Holderman, I know you're new back into your position. By the way, welcome back to it. Because you actually came from a volunteer department previous, when you were a coordinator last time, so.
Yeah, and it echoes throughout the state. You're gonna hear the exact same conversation, whether you're in East, Middle, or Tennessee. The conversation's there. It's way too difficult for these volunteers to find the time to do the training and then spend hours trying to find somebody that you can put the stuff in, or even have the equipment. Some people just don't have the equipment in their station. They don't have the computer. They don't have the internet service. So then they have to figure out where to go to do all that. We all want the same thing. We want volunteers to be better trained and to receive this money. We just have to find a happy medium to where the commission and the volunteers can meet in the middle, so they get the training and the money.
Those are the same exact things I thought of.
Before we close out the meeting, anything else on the floor?
Stephen is online. Stephen, did you have anything to add?
Unmute.
No, I I was trying. I don't think so. I've been listening and I would agree with everything that's been said. It's very cumbersome on both sides, on the processing side for the administration here and for the departments.
Thank you, Edie.
Hey, Tina, can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
This is Commissioner Green. So we submit a program that's approved at the commission level. When a department submits their in-service to you for review, do you go and verify the dates on their in-service program that was submitted at the first of the year and then verify that it was done on the dates that it was supposed to be done before you submit them and approve them for pay?
I don't know that I've ever paid attention to the date. I'm more concerned with the actual class itself.
Okay. And that's the reason I wanted to know, because, you know, we're worried about a deadline and we're worried about getting these classes submitted. And that seems to be our biggest hassle and our biggest complaint that we're hearing. We're submitting this stuff and getting it approved, but in the end, you're more worried about the type of class and make sure we did that class. You're not actually looking at those dates. I mean, to me, we're spinning our wheels, keeping the same process like we got right now. We've got to make it easier on you, number one, but also on our end user. That's the main person that we've got to get this easier for. But that's just something I just wondered if you did cross-reference those dates or not when you do your in-service audit and stuff. Thank you.
Sure.
And Tina, you do a great job, and I appreciate all your hard work on the educational incentive pay, both on the volunteer side and the career side. Thank you for all your work that you do.
Thank you.
So this will be an across the board, but another complaint I get, especially the smaller departments, is ACADIS. Some of these departments, you're lucky if they got somebody that can run a computer, much less learn ACADIS. So this was brought up in Madison County. I think again at TPAC in March. Is there anything in the rules that says every single class roster and student has to be added into ACADIS for every class that's done? And while saying that, that's what Tina is auditing, is every single class roster, everything is there. And the only thing I can find is under number 5, attendance record shall be made on each firefighter in a form prescribed by the commission and available upon inspection. But the only forms described are all the rosters. The reason I ask is when you did audits through ACADIS, the answer was when never do an audit, use the cadence again. This does not function like that. And that is a lot of my time.
So, interesting story, because we actually discussed this at the Mid-South Fire Chiefs meeting a couple weeks ago. The way the Cadis account is set up right now is basically an umbrella for the state. So we have TFACA, FFC, and Valletta that are all under this umbrella as one account. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it is the goal that we are going to be separating those out to individual accounts, which then would give us more freedom in order to make the changes, to make it more user friendly. Because right now, any changes that take place in the Cadis has to be for the good of the group, right? And not just, if we want this done, how's it gonna affect B and C, right? Because if it's gonna affect B and C negatively, well, we can't do it.
Understood.
So, but that's one of the things.
Yes.
Am I correct on that?
So it will be a fire and then also a Toledo. Right. But that is our record management system. Not, nobody sends in paper copy, nobody sends us, that is our record management system.
Right, but before Cadis, we didn't have to send in all of our rosters at the end of the year. I sent a verification form and a notarized form stating that these people have these many hours meeting these rules. During an audit is when all the rosters came out. So if Fire Department X does not submit their rosters into a Cadis, what rule says they can't get their people paid this year?
Because I remember this during our rules hearing, or it may have been during one of the rules committee. We actually took a Cadis out of the verbiage and utilized records management system.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out where it's at in the rule.
Okay. I get asked that question a lot, so I'm not trying to just cause problems. I'm asking an honest question. The next one is, what are the approved methods of doing electronic documentation where I don't have to have paper rosters? Are there any?
It has to deal with the signature. So the electronic roster, if you're utilizing, what LMS are you using? Or are you doing
I'm
an
not
EM?
yet.
Are you doing
But
an
if I go
email?
take an EMS class to get my CUs to keep my license, take my phone, hit a QR code, put my information in, it populates their roster, and I renew my medical license. There's absolutely zero paper for West Tennessee Healthcare when you go take classes now. Except for I make them fill out my roster if it's one of our in-service classes. For that only reason.
That's what I do for mine as well.
Correct.
I still have them do a paper roster.
Does Germantown still do the navigator? Just they had to quit because of this.
That's Florida dropped.
Yeah.
But I'm assuming the Germantown.
So
there are two new training officers.
and that's the thing. There's so many electronic functions out there now that will reduce the load on departments if we had a way and a means of using. I mean, my people are put in for payroll and they never touch a time. Supervisor sits, make sure they're there and document system in place to make sure they're falsified. I don't know if it'll work for this, but if we don't ask, we don't know.
Under 11, under record storage, any department that maintains training records via computer or other electronic means shall submit a request to the commission office. The department's electronic records shall be subject to audit by the commission. The department shall describe the electronic record system, identifying security safeguards that are in place. But that's not addressing what
Correct.
you're stating about
So
the,
the few departments I know that were trying to do it have quit because of the vagueness of the rules. So in the wording of that, if I built a Google Sheets program that would do that exact very thing and brought it to a meeting and got it approved, would it work? If I built the same program like EMS uses, using like Google Sheets, forms where you scan a QR code, you go on your phone and you sign in. I add your grade to it. There's even an app now where I can take a picture of your answer sheet and it grades it for me. Get away from the paper rosters
and their name
and tests.
and it
Because
all.
I can even do the testers and Google Forms.
And the other thing too.
I'm still on flip.
Yeah, I got you.
That's good. That's your head.
That's your case. But it doesn't have to be. Says if approved. Yeah.
David,
I'm just asking a question. So. Since we're going through all this week, I'm gonna ask that question. So.
That's what, we want to make this program better, more streamlined, easier for everybody. So.
This has come a long way from when I first.
Oh, yeah.
Because I was tasked with contacting their departments in East Tennessee to figure out ways to streamline it for them. So it's improved drastically.
Yes. Couple always.
It's always gonna be working.
To answer your question on, it states right here in rule that the commission can approve, but when you read number 5, you need to look more into it and right. Anyone else have anything to add? And I'm gonna go ahead and close out the subcommittee meeting at 14:18 hours.
Appreciate y'all's effort.
No, thank you.